All right. I love that song. We're going to play it again because we love it so much. Thanks for being here. I don't take it lightly that you're spending your Thursday afternoons and evenings, and it's so fun to see your faces. I am so excited to be back home and not in the middle of a school library trying to connect. And tonight we get to focus on part three. As we were connecting last week, there's so many questions about well, how do we do this and what do we do? And I always say if there was a blueprint, I would hand it out, make photocopies and send it to everybody. But we know this work is more than step by step, a blueprint to figure out next steps. It's really about these three shifts and more. But I like these three around moving from implementing the plan to designing the plan. And design, it's really about co-designing with the people in your community, your students, your colleagues, but really co-design so we can collectively work together to do what's best. So implementing the plan to designing the plan, from moving from failing to learn to improve to really learn to fail and evolve. That is such a cliche thing to say sometimes, that like, oh, we just have to fail. But it's really hard for many of us to think about actually failing and actually making a mistake. One, and it's public, we see people, but also, we're responsible for students and their work, and the work is really important. So it's not just about failing in a lesson. It's really about how do we think about making those shifts, making those changes, and how do we learn from them to evolve. So I'll talk a little bit about that today. And then the age old, this is the way it's always been. When someone says, well, this is just the way we do things here, or this is the way it's always been. We have to move from that mindset to something that's really more about how do we evolve to create the best for learners and learning. And in our minds, when we can keep that at the forefront, we can think about designing the best systems rather than this is just the way it has to be. Right. And I know that you all here are constantly fighting against that when you hit those struggles, the colleagues who want to just keep it as it always has been. So we're going to jump in. And one of the things that this is actually in chapter 13, I think, or 12. But I really wanted to focus and start here on how do we challenge the status quo. And these were 6 sections that I highlighted kind of toward the end of the book, but I just wanted to give some insight, and I'd love to hear kind of your thoughts on them too. But the first and foremost, for so long we've heard, try this program and that program and this new curriculum and this new technology, and we're going to get interactive whiteboards. Whatever it is, we've heard about the programs that are going to fix everything in education. And every time we come back to meaningful, relevant change, it is about the people. It is about the people doing the work. It is about people who are designing, pushing against status quo, coming together, working through those challenges. And it's not always a straight road, but it's really focusing on how do you bring people together in your community? How do you collaborate? And how do you collectively think about taking those steps forward together? So challenging the status quo starts with people, not programs. If you have resources to pull in, that's great, but we want to start with people first. And this is something that I'm hugely committed to, is celebrating what's positive, right? Celebrate what's working, because we are so deficit based in education. As many of you even heard our Secretary of Education talk about that last week, we're looking at NAEP scores, and we're so focused on, what's not working, that we're missing so much of what is working. And being able to highlight those things, celebrate them, I think is absolutely critical. And many times I say, let's just go walk around the classes. Let's go walk around schools and see what's working. Let's go highlight all of the things right now that we want more people to do. Because too often teachers and administrators who are doing great things think they have to hide it instead of being able to celebrate it. And so elevating that work is critical. And then 3, connecting to the heart, where this is heart work. We are connecting with people, telling stories, reminding people of why we do this work, reminding people of, it's cliche again, like just focus on your why. That's great, but we also have to focus on other people's connections and why they do this work and why it matters to each person that we're working with. And then when we tell our stories, when we share why we do the work, I find it opens up different connections with people, because each of you here have had your own experience in education. You are here either because you had teachers who were committed to you and helped you shape your future, or there were some who maybe didn't have a teacher who inspired them and they wanted to be that for somebody else. But our stories help us connect to one another, and that's really powerful. And then like here, we got to find our people, right? We got to be able to know who our people are, who lift us up. We have to be able to find people who inspire us and motivate us, because that's sometimes not always in our close circle. So finding your people, having your people to vent to and share, but also who can push your thinking and push your ideas further. Which brings me to 5, sharing your ideas. I think that, many of you know, and I've shared that it wasn't until I actually started blogging and sharing my ideas that they started to crystallize more for me. It's so easy to be like, all these great ideas, which I know all of you have, and they're sitting on a computer desk or post-it notes or all these places that are hidden. And without getting them into the world, they don't get better because they don't see the light of day and they don't see other people can't build from them. So we have to be able to share our ideas, share kind of crazy ideas, things that are working, so other people can understand them and get the benefit of them. But even more so, just me writing things down has helped me better understand my own thinking. And then the last one, I don't have it on the wall right now, but usually have my quote that believe there is good in the world and actually be the good, because really, as it comes down to it, in our own sphere of influence, we have to be the ones to take those steps and do things that really, really matter. And sometimes they're small, sometimes they're big, but if we have those ideas, we have to be able to take those steps. And that's why I loved last week, Ben saying like, I just did it, right? I just had an idea and I wanted to take those steps and be the one to try something new, because if you weren't going to do it, who else was? And so that's, for all of us in this work, trying to change the status quo, trying to shift to more learner-centered practices, thinking about how we take that small step. So I want to read, I'll stay here, but I want to read a section that from Navigate Change. And this is, it's in the last part of it. It says, I believe we can change the world through this type of education and access we provide all children. This begins with being honest about what we need to let go of, understanding what is possible, and working together to navigate the change process. And to get better and to continue to evolve, we need to be opening doors, asking questions, and sharing concerns about our education system that may have in the private but rarely share in public. Elementary teacher Justin Minkle pushes us to realize that too often we are not nearly as brave in the classroom as we expect our students to be, and it's holding us all back. Instead, he shares, I dare us all to stop worrying about looking good to our principal, to our parents, to our visitors from the school board. I dare us to try instead to actually become good for the children in our care. And that sounds harsh, right? But like I loved that push and that reminder from Justin, because if we're so worried about what someone else thinks outside, rather than what is happening for our students each and every day, we aren't really going to see those changes. And I had a teacher come up to me last week, and she said, I've been doing this for 18 years, and I keep getting frustrated with what the Board of Education is asking me to do, or my county is asking me to do. She said, it doesn't make sense. And I said, well, why are you doing it? She goes, because I feel like they're going to come in and ask me if I did it. And if I didn't do it, I'm going to be embarrassed. And I said, okay, let's unpack that a little bit. What would they do? She's like, I don't even know, probably nothing. And I said, well, when's the last time they came to your classroom? And she was like, never. They don't even know anything about my classroom. They've never been in my classroom. So I'm like, so you're doing something that someone three like offices away has sent to you to your classroom and doesn't know the impact because you're afraid of what they think, rather than the impact it's having on your students in your classroom. And she went, okay. I said, I'm not trying to get you in trouble, but I'm just trying to get you to think about it. And then I said, well, what would your principal say? She said, my principal trusts me and says I can do what I think is best for my kids. And I said, okay, so what are you doing? And she was like, I'm still not, I'm afraid. And so I say this, and it's like, I see you all laughing, but it is so common. We have this like fear of these other people out there that we let drive us, instead of actually thinking about what our kids need in that moment and trusting our instincts, our professionalism. And so as long as we keep doing that and letting outsiders dictate what we do in our classrooms without really understanding the complexity of our classrooms, we're missing that impact that we can have. And I'm not saying we ignore mandates. I'm not saying we ignore the district office. That's not what I'm advocating for. I'm talking about open dialogue about why are we doing this? What are the resources? What are the expectations? And how do we come together as parents, educators, administrators, other policy members, and really start thinking about that was, but it will start with teachers shifting practices and then elevating what's working, right? Because otherwise people outside the classroom don't have anything else to go on besides the data and the things that come out of the classrooms. So another thing that I want to highlight is and this comes in the last chapter as well. Being great doesn't mean that you are trying to be better than others. It means you are trying to be the best for students. I hear so many teachers say, and administrators, well, I don't, my colleagues that, they try and push me down. They don't want me to do this because it makes them look bad. And Dave Burgess, who's the author of Teach Like a Pirate, brilliant, but he said, a doctor, if someone was in trouble across the room and they were having trouble breathing or they were having a heart attack from across the room, and a doctor wouldn't sit there and watch them because he didn't want to make everyone else look bad. They would lean into their strengths, they would do their job, and they would take care of that person because they could save a life. And as educators, if we know there's a better way, we know that we can use our skills to help somebody. It's not about not looking good in front of other people. It's about really making sure that we are stepping up, we are taking that chance, and we're doing what we can to challenge that status quo, to help people, and to actually reach the outcomes that we want. And so, again, it's not looking better than others. It's how are we doing our job really well? How are we actually focusing on doing what's best and thinking about what the learners in our care? And sometimes those are the adults, right? What do the adults need? What do the students need? And how can we continually show up for the people that we are serving without first worrying about the people outside of our classrooms? The process is messy. I said at the beginning, there's definitely not a blueprint to be like, here's all the things that you should be doing. But chapter 12, no, actually chapter 10, I want to go back to designing the future, because when we design our systems, it is messy, but we can start with a goal. We can start with what we're trying to accomplish. We learn through iteration. We learn through growth. And if we are going to change systems, if we are going to change practices, then that is the way we have to empathize. We have to start with understanding the needs of our community, that design process. We have to then start thinking and ideating about all the solutions and putting those crazy ideas on the table. We have to think about how do we define our next steps and prototype, test some things out, and then see what's working and what's not. And those types of practices, again, we're not taking off the shelf to say, okay, here's the new program we're buying. We're designing those systems collectively with the people in our communities. And when we use the design thinking process, we start to see more and more new ideas and better outcomes come out. So I want to read one more section from Design the Future, and this is in the very last part of the chapter. It says, COVID-19 caused many of us to evolve to meet the needs of those we serve. There is no doubt that it has transformed how we learn and interact with one another. For many of us, making these shifts illustrated that creating lasting change in how we teach is about more than learning about the latest technology or digitizing learning experiences. Adding more content, more assignments, more meetings will not enable us to create something better if we don't prioritize and focus on what matters most. The steps that you take can have a lasting impact on your students and community. As Mother Teresa acknowledged, I alone cannot change the world, but I can cast a stone across the waters to create many ripples. Our school-centered systems are well established, and the shift to learner-centered systems won't happen overnight. But the evolution of educational practices is happening in classrooms all across the world because of educators who understand their learners and design new and better systems each day in their classrooms and schools. These incremental shifts compound day after day. Big changes begin with small steps. And so I think about all these small steps. Roy, I see you on here, and we just chatted last week about this, the small steps of, let's try a micro-credential in our schools. Let's try that and see if it totally shifts teacher education. Let's think about, Janelle's working on micro schools, and how do you create these small schools that can create models for other people. And those are the steps that I know feel hard, and sometimes feels like there's so many things you have to figure out. But we'll look back in years and think about these small steps and these changes that are starting to create totally different systems and reshape the way that we see what's possible in education. And it's going to be collectively, as we think about the education ecosystem, how we bring all those together, how we connect people. And I know that it feels far away in some senses, but we're starting to see these dots connect. We're starting to see this become more and more the norm rather than these disparate practices. And so I have tremendous amount of hope and sense of possibility about what's happening. I just think we need to connect with each other more and more. And as we think about all of you, I'm like so inspired by seeing your faces and knowing the work that you're doing. It's because you're willing to show up and be brave and really think about how to create that path forward. And the last part that I want to read in here, these are only 3 short chapters, but I think really important chapters, is the last part. It's almost the last part of the book. It says, I'm optimistic as I continue to see positive shifts that point toward progress in our education system and challenge the status quo to create new and better opportunities for the learners across the world. I would be remiss, however, if I didn't acknowledge that I know that there is a wide range of access and opportunities that learners have. Although at times it can feel daunting to think about the enormous challenges of shifting an entire system, whether it be in the classroom, a school, or a district, or a whole nation, I know it's possible, and it is so important to look at the progress we continue to make. Keep sharing, connecting, and pushing each other to evolve and to meet the needs of learners in your classrooms today and tomorrow. So I want to go into some sharing and kind of thinking about some of the next steps. But I think that, to me, that is the frontier, right? Is there's people who are leaning into this work. And that is the call to action for us on this call. And for those thinking about this, the people leaning into this work are creating amazing opportunities for young people. And then we continue to have a greater divide for those students who don't have educators or don't have systems that are leaning into this work. And so how do we continue to create those opportunities and cast that wider sense of urgency so that more and more young people have these opportunities to learn in ways that honor their strengths, give them a sense of possibility, and help them to develop the skills to really navigate their path. So I want to take a minute and invite this group to think about, I always love to do a good like continue, stop, start. And Kelsey is on here and can kind of take some notes for us. But I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a moment. And I'd love for you all to unmute and take a minute to share what are some things that we could do in education to continue. What are some things we should continue to do, I should say, in the work that you're all doing? Like, let's elevate some of those things. What are you doing that we want to continue to focus on? I know I just didn't give you much time, but I was excited to hear all your ideas. Let me share my screen and Kelsey can.
Hey, Katie, can you just shoot me that link?
Yeah, I can. And I'll share it with everybody else too. And if you want to put it in if you want to just write it in, you can too. Finding community. Ben says continue to collaborate. What? Oh, I see. I'm seeing some starts. All right. Oh, I shifted it. As we think about this, so what do you want to continue to do? Love it. What do we want to stop? I'll just give us a couple minutes to jot some of those things down and then.
I'm going to speak out loud. I was just washing flour off my hands before I could unmute, but I'm really inspired by, in terms of what we should continue doing, I think continue saying this isn't good enough yet. And I don't know, and maybe that's paired with I don't know yet what is, or what it would look like, or what the route for change is, but continuing to imagine that a better future is possible for oops, sorry, I muted. And continue to imagine that a better future is possible for our kids and for ourselves as educators, and then continue trying things, whether it's a small experiment or a big change. Continuing to try things will help us eventually move in the right direction.
Love it. Thank you, Gail. I love saying it's not good enough, trying things. Anything else you'd want to add to the continue? I love this one here, reframing what success is. Oops, I keep jumping it. What success is in education. I think that's, we talked about that a lot in the first book club, but really thinking about making that more common definition of what success is, reframing that so we can see joy, a sense of self, navigating, developing skills that align with the world as much more centered in our systems. All right, we need to stop. Top-down canned curriculum. Yes, 100%. We know if we have personalized or if we want personalized learning, if we want kids to have opportunities to do things that matter to them, top-down canned curriculum, pacing guides day in and day out, really don't help us meet those needs. Stop burning out new teachers and veteran teachers. Yep, saying that's the way we do it. Yep, I just was talking to a group the other day really about it's not more, it's different, right? It's not about let's keep adding more and more. We have to think about what are the things we're going to stop doing? What are the things that aren't serving us that we have to do away with so that we can move forward? Awesome. All right. Well, we've taken some time to brainstorm some ideas. I wanted to hear in the big group where I'm going to split you off into 2 groups to kind of continue the conversation about what you want to start, stop, and continue. And I'll drop in some other prompts if you guys want to continue the conversation. We'll go for about 15 minutes in some breakout rooms so that we can build the community. And that was the promise of this: build community, share connections, share what you're doing. And then we'll come back about 4:15 to close up.